I think we are live. Perfect. Welcome everybody to the third episode of the Afrofuturism series of writing stories. Let me get everything set up. 1 second. Let me get this here. 1 second. Okay, I think the cat wants to say hello. Okay. 1 second. I'm gonna share screen here. I hope everyone's been doing well. Okay. All right. This week, I've actually thought a little bit about the type of story that I would like to write. I think it was an inspiration from an interaction in the place I'm staying at. There's these mobs that I think there was like these mobs that had like invaded the house. So I sort of was thinking of like a horror type story that is somewhat connected to the Afrofuturism world. Let me see if I can share this on Facebook. 1 second. Just want to check this real quick. Just let people know that I'm doing this. 1 moment. Yeah. I'm gonna do this. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So the process that the story that I'll be writing about, it will be I'm gonna try to integrate this a little bit with I'm gonna title this the mobs. The mobs. And I want this story to take place a little bit in a colonial era. I wonder, I think the first processes that I have, like in terms of the type of story, I think it's gonna be a horror story. And I want it to be in a colonial era type space. So I'm going to, I think I want to, I don't know, let's see. I'm just gonna start writing. I want it to take place a little bit in a Caribbean setting. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see where it goes and where it flows. But I think it's gonna be at the center of the story is gonna be mobs, and these mobs are not gonna be good news for whoever or wherever the people are and where they're centered at. Okay, so I'm just gonna start typing and we'll see where the story goes. Because you know how these things work. It's like it kind of evolves. Maybe I'll do the idea that I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I won't be doing the idea that I'm supposed to be doing. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. For those who are tuning in just now, this is a weekly experiment that I've been doing for the last 2 weeks, I would say 3 weeks, and just to open up a little bit my creative process and how I write stories, and just also to be accountable to write more and do it more publicly and see my process and thinking these different processes. So I have about an hour and we'll get started. Okay, so it looks like by naming the character Ricardo, I'm making it more like of a Spanish person name. Um, so what I'm getting in my mind is like, okay, this person is traveling to he's maybe this person is an explorer, I don't know, but he's traveling somewhere and he goes into the city and the city is completely deserted. And then this is, I think, yeah, I think I see this story now. It's very visceral. We'll see where it goes. I don't know if I want to say Ricardo. Maybe I'll leave it at that and see what happens. And I think it's maybe African City might be a little problematic because it's like very broad. And I know a lot of people confuse. They're like, oh yeah, the Africa is not a country. So maybe I could be more specific. Let's say if I say West African. I think West African really just like centers it down, like so people know exactly where we're at. When he arrived, there was a town that was completely deserted. See, right now I'm showing more the deserted thing. So what I could do is I'm telling more. So what I could do is I could show that process much like much better of like a group of people entering into a city. Okay. Let's see. The rain was moving downwards from the sky. It dripped on the leaves of the nearby forest. Okay. The settlement that began less than a decade ago. You see, that's interesting. Maybe I could start the story with like foreshadowing or actually telling exactly what happened to that settlement. Okay, the rain was moving downward from the sky. It dripped on the leaves, the large green banana leaves of the nearby forest settlement that began less than a decade ago. The settlement that began less than a decade ago was completely disappeared. See, maybe I'll start with that. Completely disappeared. Ricardo traveled by sea from the coast of an ancient west to the coast of an ancient West African city. When he arrived there with his crew, the town was completely deserted. So now I'm going to try to show what that town looks like. They carry backpacks. Okay, I think the cat is. Okay, let's see. There were a group of 12. They were a group of 12. They wore hats and carried backpacks filled with tools and maps to write this new space. The ground was filled with vines and green leaves. Large cemented buildings. This oddly feels like a story that I'm writing personally because I've been working on this novel around the Haitian Revolution. And I feel like this is very similar to this this scene. So I'm gonna try to pivot a little bit on just what I'm imagining. Let's see, they were a group of 12. They wore hats and carried backpacks filled with tools and maps to write news to write in this new space as they walked through it. The ground was filled with old vines and green leaves. Large cemented buildings were completely empty. I said 10 years ago. The ground was filled with old vines and green leaves. Large cemented buildings were completely emptied. So I'm trying to show what, like, if there's a group of people that are traveling and they're going to this completely new land, and this new land is completely deserted, I almost want to construct this space of eeriness. Let me try to do that. The ground was filled with old vines and green leaves. Large cemented buildings were completely empty. Yeah, I'm not even sure if this is Earth. I guess it is Earth since I said West Africa. I don't know the timeline. I don't know if this is the future. I don't know if this is past. It might be most likely the past. Um, okay, let's set up shop here in the corner. Said Ricardo wiping sweat from his forehead and placing his bag on the floor near the footsteps of the large pyramid. Near the footstep of a large pyramid. Let's set up shop here in the corner. So I guess what is the point of the story? So if this is going to be a horror story, and then it has an Afrofuturist bent to it, so I have to add the magic. So I guess what I'm thinking in my brain right now is these mobs are like tied to the spirit of the land, and maybe they're seeking revenge, and maybe they arise from the food, and maybe these mobs are just like extremely destructive and they eat the people alive. I do want to add the monster type to it. I've always kind of have a bent towards the horror type because I feel horror within the context of an Afrofuturist story can really add a new layer to things. The thriller aspect. The blue sky was rising. Could this be West African? I guess trying to figure. I guess I'm just gonna write for the next 5 minutes and see where this goes. Let's see. The rain was moving downwards from the sky. It dripped on a large green banana. It dripped on the large green banana leaves on the nearby forest. The sentiment that began less a decade ago completely disappeared. 10 years ago, Ricardo traveled by sea to the coast of an ancient West African city. When he arrived there with his crew, the town was completely deserted. They were a group of 12. Let's say 13. No, someone tell me put 13. They wore hats and carried backpacks filled with tools and maps to write in this new space. As they walked to it, the ground was completely filled with old vines and green leaves. Large cemented buildings were completely emptied and decrepit. Nature had clashed with these structures intensely, breaking down the architecture, and making and shaping it into a human forest, maybe a human forest. Let's see. Okay. I don't know. Does that make sense? Nature had clashed with these structures intensely, breaking down the architecture and shaping it into strange sculptures, maybe. Nature had clashed with these structures intensely, breaking down the architecture and shaping it into strange, like what metaphor can I make? Strange, uh, I'll just say sculptures. How you spell sculptures? I don't even know. Ricardo knew something was wrong. Why was there a city that was completely deserted in the middle of this forest? Let's set up shop in here in the corner, said Ricardo, wiping sweat from his forehead. I don't even know if this is how you write forehead. It says forward, forehead. Let's see. Forward, forehead. There you go. Placing his bag on the floor near the footstep of a large pyramid, the clouds were just clearing now. The blue sky was seen as the sun from the horizon lifted its rays to the deserted city. Paco and Elizabeth went back, Paco with a C. Paco and Elizabeth went out back to the forest to forage whatever types of food they could find. They grabbed a gun and walked pretty fast. See, I could either make them hunt monkeys or boars. I think boars would be much more natural, like species. Or it could be, maybe it could be a different type of species that we've never heard about. Let's just make that. I think that could be interesting. They grabbed the gun and walked in the forest with tall trees and that touched the clouds. They heard sounds sounds in the bushes. A large boar ran towards them. You see, I could have made this scene much more exciting where they're like, maybe the boar is running after them, maybe it doesn't shoot them at the first try. But I think since it's a short story and time is of the essence, I can't dramatize this. I could, I potentially could have done that, but I feel like I have to, like, what I think there's something called the economy of words. It's like you have to make sure that every word that you use, like it plays a role in the bigger context of the story. She hit her target with the first shot. The boar collapsed on the floor and blood dripped from his head. Yeah, I don't know if there's gonna be a plot point here. Because if this entire story is about like these deadly moths that are like from the spirit of the forest and they're gonna be pretty much eaten alive, and I'm giving away the ending, but I think that, yeah, I wonder what they're gonna do. I think this is where I think the power of storytelling, especially when you're writing, is like you have to be able to put your characters in certain situations, and you have to want to see what they do. So right now, I'm writing about Paco and Elizabeth, but there's also Ricardo, who I started the story with, um, and could see I could see the mobs being like a representation of like the people of the land, like the indigenous Africans that lived there, and now they've been chased out, and all these colonizers are coming in. So that could be a theme in this story, but I don't know. I don't necessarily know it'll be overt or direct. So if they haven't recognized this species yet, I have to give this boar a color. Let's see, what color could this be? It could be green. Green means a little weird. Green could be interesting because green would mean that they're camouflaging a little bit. But if I put it green, that means that she probably shouldn't have gotten a good shot like this in the first try. So I'm gonna say, what can I say? Purple? No, I used purple last week for one of the characters. I'll say blue. I'll say blue. Let's see. Let's see. A large blue colored boar. Great shot. I don't think I recognized this species before. You see, one thing I struggle a lot with in this writing process is that how do you, it's like a lot of the times when you're doing a lot of world building and you're doing a lot of characterization, you have to be able to show that world building and the characters through not only their actions, but what they say. So like, this is the first time that I've done this in this story. It's like when the character's like, me either, I've been on many expeditions in the past and this is the first. So this, I'm pretty much describing Elizabeth now as that she's an expert and she's gone through these things. It's not her first time. So that's why she shot the first shot and got it in the first place. So she's an expert in that sense. It's either like, I think this is more vivid if they're carrying it from stick by stick in their shoulders. Let's see, me either. I've been on many expeditions in the past, and this is the first, Elizabeth says, walking next to the boar. They both pull out a cord out of their bag and tie the feet of the boar, of the blue boar. Let me see it. Blue colored, or from opposite corners of a small wooden trunk. Paco had what did he do? He was chopping, had chopped. It's heavy. So I'm breaking another rule as well, because usually in short stories, one of the things they say is you should just do one character. Just the fact that I've already introduced three characters makes it a little bit unimaginable. I have to bring back the focus to Ricardo and what he's doing here. I think I got carried away because I wanted to show a little bit of the world, and the world was the forest, and that's what they were able to do. So we'll see how I'm going to be able to tie this, because now I have 28 minutes to finish the story, because I don't want to write a novel right now. So I'm just going to be writing for the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and see what happens. Let's see if anyone's commenting. Okay, nothing yet. All right. Okay. She's heavy, Paco says, walking into the deserted city in the wet floor and the sun hitting both of their faces. They walked towards their tent that was set up. Wow, you both were amazing for catching this. Rick says. Okay. See, I either could say Ricardo was inside the tent, flipping pages after pages, reading from past journals of people who've traveled. It doesn't make sense. I think he would have to he would have to be reading journals of people. You see, if this was a longer piece, this could be really dope. Like to actually put the journal of the people who disappeared in the prior city. Ricardo was inside the tent, flipping pages, reading from past. Okay, I think I could do that. You see, I have to be so economical with the words in the narrative because every decision, every corner, every action that these characters are taking, because I'm literally creating a world out of thin air right now. Ricardo was, and I have to see what he does because I have to make it night. It's gonna be night soon because this was the morning. Ricardo was inside the tent, flipping pages after pages. He discovered at the top of the pyramid. Wow, there's a pyramid. He used this is the second time I'm using artificial intelligence. I don't know if I want to use an artificial intelligence here because you see, I'm blending the timelines right now. Originally, we think that this is like 15th, 14th century travels, but I don't think that is. It's an alternate history pretty much. Because if there's deep technology and these people are going to West Africa as like explorers and interesting. He discovered a bunch of journals on top of the pyramid. Filled dust. Grabbed. He grabbed. He uses digital software to scan the information from each page within second was able to have the language the cipher deciphered. I almost forgot how to write deciphered. Okay, there's a lot of okay. There you go. Did not know. I forgot how to spell that. He used his digital transcriber to scan the information from each page, and within a second was able to have the language deciphered with his portable 3D. Yeah, I'm just like computer. He printed a completely new manuscript. Wait, I'm just gonna, yep. He uses digital transcriber to scan information from each pages, and within a second was able to have the language deciphered. With his portable 3D printer, not computer, he he created a completely new manuscript in the language he could understand. He spent entire he spent the entire morning, afternoon reading from the journals, trying to uncover what had happened. So how do I do that? I just don't want to make this like a traditional, okay, these mobs are like, let's say they're outside and they're cooking, like it's like they're roasting the boar, they're outside around the fire. Are these mobs going to just appear out of nowhere and start like to eat them alive, or is this going to be tied to a lore or some type of myth? Because I haven't really given any myth of what that society. Yes, there's pyramids. Yes, it's in the middle of a forest, but I don't know. Let me write and see what happens. Got 20 minutes. He spent the entire morning and afternoon reading from the journal, trying to uncover what had happened. And I'm thinking as well, like, if I do this again, I definitely want to think through, like, what is this? Like, what are the themes that I want to explore? Because I feel like there's a lot going on in my brain. I feel like there's so much in terms of what's happening in our country and what's happening in the world. I wonder if there could be more association to these things and how I structure these sessions. Because I think that could be really, really helpful in terms of like carving out certain ideas and with the purpose behind this. Because a lot of great writing, what they say is that you have to have like, what is the organizing question that the story will be about? And right now, I kind of just started out of nowhere because I just felt inspired by this horror type story. But yeah, let's continue and see what happens. He spent the entire morning and afternoon reading from the journals, trying to uncover what had happened. It was night. The full moon was up ahead, up above them. They stood in a circle around a large fire. The boar being roasted and twisted upside down manually. This is an African society. You see, this is interesting. I almost want to change the name Ricardo. I guess I don't really specify skin color. You see, one of the things they talk about in writing is like if you're writing a main character and you don't necessarily specify that this person is black, then majority of the world or whoever reads it is going to assume that it's white. So Ricardo is a black character. I'm just gonna say this. Ricardo says this. I think I just have to put that there. Change Ricardo. Yeah, it. When I reread it again, I think I'll add it. But as of now, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows this. It's strange. This was an African society that thrived here, but suddenly disappeared. Ricardo said with a worried face. Let's see, who was the other character? Cool. Got up with his knife. What was the third person again? Was it Rick? Yeah, Rick says. I want to introduce everybody. Rick says. This. Everyone looked. Everyone looked at Elizabeth with a terrified. That doesn't make sense. Everyone stared at Elizabeth with a terrified look as the flame in the middle shone the shadows on her face. Few them gulped. Well, they well I wonder if you could say like maybe this Ricardo's why is he visiting these spaces? Maybe he's connected to this place in some way. Not sure. Well, I haven't gotten to that yet. I still have way, a long way to go in these readings. Ricardo says, why don't you go? Okay, I have literally 12 minutes. I need to make something happen. Something crazy needs to happen. And at least the climax. So there could be some form of resolution, a satisfying resolution. Again, Satisfying resolution. Okay, I literally just made this person from the future. There you go. They just traveled from the past. I don't know how I could. I don't know. Why would they even travel to the past? A lot of questions. Having questions in a story is good. You want the reader to ask questions because questions pull them inside the story. That's not how it works, Ricardo says. When you're an anthropologist from the future, you have to make sure you document everything. Okay, let's see. Paco. See, I'm again, this might be a little peculiar. I'm vegetarian, so I don't know why I made the boar as like this. They could have easily, I could have easily made the characters go out in the forest and pick for fruits. That would have been, maybe they were vegetarians, maybe that's what the future divined. But I see, I just kind of went with the flow, found the boar. Let's see. Paco got up and began slicing the boar into a few pieces and started. This is interesting. So they're from the future and they have all these crazy tools. It should be like while they're sleeping or as they're eating. I think for time's sake, I think those moths are gonna have to like they're gonna have to come right now. It can't be while they're eating because if they're if no, it can't be while they're sleeping because if they're sleeping and these moths come in, then I'm gonna have to close out this scene, and there's gonna be a lot of conversation because they're eating. So I'm gonna make this moth come right now. But I almost wonder, like, I really wanted to, like, as Ricardo's reading this journal and he realizes what these mobs are, because the reader's not going to realize, but I'm telling you what the mobs are. It's sort of like a revenge of like the African like spirit in terms of everything that's been done. And they manifest themselves as the mobs. But yeah, I don't know if I have space to even like synchronize those reality because it would be really cool if like he's reading in his tent and then suddenly he hears all this stuff and then he's like, it started just like that. Actually, I could do that. Let me try to do that. Maybe it doesn't have to be anything. As they're eating and munching down, Cardo had manuscript words that it all started buzzing of buzzing sound I was being heard, that being heard every direction. When he looked up, he could hear the same sound. Everyone group stopped. It looked at each other. What was happening? I'll clean this when I reread it because I know there's a lot of grammatical errors right now. There's something called the perfect draft. I don't know if it's a myth, but some writers do this. It's like they write the perfect draft and the first process. I don't know if it's true. Not everyone's capable of doing this. I'm sure not able to do that. Maybe when I'm 50 years old or something. As they're eating and munching down, Ricardo had the manuscript right in front of him. The words mentioned that it all started with the buzzing sounds that was being heard in every direction. When he looked up, he could hear the same sounds. Could hear the same sound. Everyone in the group stopped eating and looked at each other to see what was happening. The sounds grew louder and louder. As everyone got up and looked around to the stars and in every direction, Ricardo looked back into the text. He could see that. Ricardo looked back into the text and he could see that. Okay. Mention. It doesn't have to be giant. I'll say tiny mobs because it's more vicious if they're tiny ones. They ate through the tents. They ate through the skin, and particularly ate the eyes. The human eyes. Ricardo continued as the sounds got louder and louder. You read that hundreds of years ago, a slave trader was piercing the eyes. Piercing? I don't know. Piercing the eyes of Africans shut so they would not fight and be traded into the slave trade. That literally just like, I'm literally doing a data. They call this a information dump, which is not good. I don't want to say it's not good, but I think it is. I'm running out of time, so I have to do the little thing, and then I'm gonna go back and try to do the ending. They ate through the tents, they ate through the skin, and particularly ate the human eyes. Ricardo continued as the sound got louder and louder. He read that 100 years ago. He read he read hundreds of, he read suspected that the spirit of Africans inhabited the mobs. As now was dropping the journals in his on the floor and running towards the tent. Shouts as the noise got even louder. Small bugs could be seen. Let's see. Small bugs could be seen flying towards the flame, attracted by the light. When one landed on Rick's arm, screamed, ow, ow, ow. How do you spell ow, ow? Screamed, ouch, slamming his hands on the bug. Blood, red blood. Or that was almost an evil laugh. When one landed on Rick's arm, he screamed, ouch, slamming his hands on the mop, and red blood dripping from the from his arm. Yeah, I have less. I'm pretty much out of time now, but I'm gonna try to finish this and like not try. I need to remove that word from vocabulary. I'm going to finish this story in the next 3 minutes. He screamed out, slamming his hands on the mouth, and red blood dripping from his hands. More and more moths were attracted by the cooked boar. These moths began to eat away the meat to the bone. These moths, they're dangerous. This is why the colony is no longer here. Cargo says, you see, I did write a story like this a little bit. Similar setting where it's like something happened, they're exploring that place, and then those things are like not good and they have to escape. I think the way I'm going to end the story is I'm just going to have them do a time jump, because if they're from the future, okay, let's see. And these moths, these moths, they're dangerous. That's why the colony is no longer here, Ricardo said. As the tent retracts into a small cube, we're going to have a time jump right now, right this moment. Ricardo says, Rick started to scream as more mobs begin to eat away his entire that's scary, his entire arm. Vortex opened in the middle of the city, and they each ran towards it. Should I say time jump or should it jump back in the ship? I'm gonna say quantum jump. Quantum jump. A vortex opened in the middle of the city, and they each ran towards the blue light, jumping back into the ship that was deep in space behind. Okay, I think this is it. Let's see how many words we got. 1070. Okay, this is a lot. It's yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna reread this and edit it as we go. The rain was moving downward from the sky. It dripped on the large green banana leaves on the nearby forest. The settlement that began less than a decade ago completely disappeared. You see, I could say Ricardo traveled. You see, I shouldn't say by sea. Ricardo traveled to the coast of a West African city to investigate what had happened. You see, now it makes more sense. When he arrived there with his crew, the town was he would already know if the town was. I already said that earlier, right? Okay, I'm just gonna restart this again. The rain was moving downward, and let's see if I could zoom in as well and see. The rain was moving downward from the sky. I don't know why sky is capitalized. It dripped on the large green banana leaves of the nearby forest. The settlement that began less than a decade ago completely disappeared. Ricardo traveled to the coast of an ancient West African city to investigate what had happened. When he arrived there with his crew, they were a group of 13. They wore hats and carried backpacks filled with tools and maps to write in this new space as they walked through it. The ground was filled with old vines and green leaves. Large cemented buildings were completely emptied and decrepit. Nature had clashed with these structures, intensely breaking down their architecture and shaping it into strange sculptures. Ricardo knew something was wrong. Why was there a city that was completely deserted in the middle of this forest? That doesn't make sense, because if he knew that he's going to investigate, so those are some of the plot points holes that needs to be fixed. I'm just gonna delete this. Let's set up shop in the corner. Let's set up shop here in the corner, said Ricardo, wiping sweat from his forehead and placing his bag on the floor near the footsteps of a large pyramid. The clouds were just clearing now. The blue sky was seen as the sun from the horizon lifted its rays to this deserted city. Paco and Elizabeth went out back to the forest to forage whatever types of food they could find. They grabbed their guns and walked in the forest with large tall trees that touched the clouds. They heard sounds in the bushes, and a large blue-colored boar ran towards them. "Watch out," Paco screamed, holding his gun in his hands, Elizabeth shooting a first shot that echoed out in the area. She hit her target with the first shot. The boar collapsed on the floor, and the blood dripped from his forehead. "This will make a nice meal for tonight," said Elizabeth. "Good shot. I don't think I've recognized this species before," said Paco. "Me either. I've been on many expeditions in the past, and this is a first," Elizabeth says, walking next to the boar. "Shall I say many expeditions on different planets?" I'll say planets. That will give the reader that this is more like futuristic. And because I say that they jump into a ship at the end, so I don't want to like just shock people that there's a ship and the moon. Okay, me either. I've been on many expeditions on different planets in the past, and this is the first. Elizabeth says, walking next to the boar. They both pulled out a cord out of their bag and tied the feet of the blue-colored boar from opposite corners of a small wooden trunk Paco had chopped down. She's a heavy one. Paco says, walking back into the deserted city and the wet floor and the sun hitting both of their faces. They walk towards their tent that was set up. Wow, you both are amazing for catching this, Rick says with his small height. Well, Elizabeth did all the work, really, Paco says. Ricardo was inside the tent, flipping pages after pages, reading. He discovered a bunch of journals on top of the pyramid filled with dust. He grabbed them by his full arms, blowing the dust particles away and wiping it with his hands. He coughed a few times. He used his digital transcriber to scan the information from each pages, and within a second was able to have the language deciphered. With his portable 3D printer, With his portable 3D printer, he created a completely new manuscript in a language he could understand. He spent the entire morning and afternoon reading from the journals, trying to uncover what had happened. It was night. The full moon was just above them. They stood in a circle around a large fire with the boar being roasted and twisted upside down manually. What would you find in those journals, Chief? Elizabeth shouts. It's strange. This was an African society that thrived here, but suddenly disappeared. Ricardo said with a worried face. Paco got up with his knife and began slicing the boar, and blood came out. Oof, it's not ready. Give it another 15 minutes, Rick said. Really, what do you mean disappear? We know this. That's the first thing they told us. That's the first thing they told us. The real question is what drove them away. Everyone stared at Elizabeth with a terrified look as the flame in the middle shone the shadows on her face. A fear of them gulped. Well, I haven't gotten to that yet. I still have a long way to go in these readings, Ricardo says. Why don't you just go to the end of the book? Rick says with a smirk. That's not how it works, Ricardo says. When you're a space anthropologist, you see, I'm changing it right now. They're not from the future. They're just when you're an anthropologist, planetary anthropologist, you have to make sure you document everything. Paco got up and began slicing the boar into a few pieces and started passing it around in a brown carton plate. The 3D computer had produced for them a few minutes ago. As they're eating and munching now, Ricardo had the manuscript right in front of him. The words mentioned that it all started with the buzzing sounds that were being heard from every direction. When he looked up, he could hear the same sound. Everyone in the group stopped eating and looked at each other to see what was happening. The sounds grew louder and louder as everyone got up and looked around the stars in every direction, confused. Ricardo looked back into the text which mentioned that these tiny moths had arrived. They ate through the tents, they ate through the skin, and particularly ate the human eyes. Ricardo continued as the sound got louder and louder. He read that hundreds of years ago, a slave trader was piercing the eyes of Africans shut so they would not fight and be traded into the slave trade. Some suspected that the spirit of those Africans inhabited the moths. Guys, we need to leave now, Ricardo said, dropping their journals on the floor and running towards the tent. What's wrong? Elizabeth shouts as the noise got louder. It got even louder. Small bugs could be seen flying against the moonlight towards the flame, let's see. When one landed on Rick's arm, he screamed out, slamming his hands under Moth and red blood dripping from his arms. More and more moths were attracted by the cooked boar, and these moths began to eat away the meat to the bone. It's these moths that are dangerous. This is why the colony is no longer here, Ricardo says. As the tent retracted into a small cube, we're going, he says, as the tent retracted into a small cube, he says, Ricardo says, I would say, Ricardo says, we're going to have to quantum jump right now and right this moment. Rick started to scream as more moths began to eat away his entire arm. A vortex opened in the middle of the city, and they each ran towards the blue light wormhole, jumping back into the ship that was deep in space behind the moon. There it is. The moths. A short story. It started as an idea. Everything was just kind of going everywhere, but I think the creative constraint really kind of captures the space to create something like this. I think it needs a lot of cleanup for sure. But we have the essence of the story. I didn't know who Ricardo was starting, but I just knew that he was coming into a city and it had to make it a little bit futuristic. So I think I'm pretty happy with this. Yeah, we'll see if I do this next week again, but if I do this, because I was planning for 3, but if I do this again, I want to explore like a societal like issue and how that connects. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Everyone from the future will be looking this back in the next year or 2 or more, because I feel like YouTube eternalizes these things. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe. Click the subscribe button for this channel. Support me on Patreon. And until next time, grazie. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing.